Salvati discipuli. This video is the second lesson in Chapter 15 in Latin for the New Millennium, Volume 2, and it is on gerundives. Now, gerunds and gerundives are similar in how they form, okay, but they function completely differently. In the previous video, you learned that gerunds are verbal nouns, okay, and they translate actively, like laughing, playing, something like that. They only appear in the neuter singular, and they only appear in the genitive, dative, accusative, and ablative, okay? And that's what a gerund is, okay? Now, gerundives are slightly different. Gerundives are adjectives, okay? So a gerundive is a verbal adjective. Now, again, you have learned verbal adjectives before. You learned them as participles. And technically, the gerundive is a type of participle in some respects. It often translates when it's just hanging out on its own, like the future passive participle, okay? So it translates to be something. Now, what's interesting about that is that when you use a gerundive, it is translating passively. So a gerund, the verbal noun, translates actively, something, right? Blanking, singing, dancing, whatever. But a gerundive, the verbal adjective, translates to be blanked, right? To be sung, to be loved, whatever. It does form in a very similar way to the gerund, okay? You add ndus, nda, ndum onto the stem. But notice that because it's an adjective, it can be singular, it can be plural, it can be any gender, it can be masculine, feminine, or neuter, and it can be nominative, unlike a gerund, okay? So when you have a gerundive and it's just hanging out on its own, I'll explain what that means in a second because gerunds can function in a different way. But when it's just hanging out on its own, it translates to be blanked, okay? So the oppidum appropinquandum is a town to be approached. Okay. Now, probably the most common use of a gerundive is in the passive paraphrastic, and you are not learning that in this video. There's one more video, and that is where you will learn the passive paraphrastic. Okay. All right. So let's also learn a little bit more about a gerundive phrase, because that's another way that you will see the gerundive used. When you have a gerund, which is a verbal noun, it can take a predicate, right? So I give you an example here. Habeo magnum amorum, I have a great love, legendi libros, of reading books. So our gerund here, legendi, genitive because it's an objective genitive with amorum, and it has a direct object, libros, okay? Now, you would almost never see this in Latin because there's this idiomatic use of the gerundive that you use instead of a gerund. So when a gerund takes a direct object, like it does in this example sentence, the object, in this case libros, is attracted into the case of the gerund. So that actually changes the gerund into a gerundive because it's going to be in the same gender numbering case as its object. Now, the object will not stay in the accusative. It's going to be attracted into the case of the gerund, but the ending on the gerund changes to be the same case as it's always been, but it's going to be the same number and gender as the object. So let me give you an example here. So the original sentence, habeo magnum amorum legendi libros, I have a great love of reading books, would almost never show up like this in Latin. Instead, libros is going to be attracted into the case of legendi, which is genitive. So there we go. Libros has become genitive. But libros is plural and it's masculine. So both the ending of libros and legendi are going to change to be genitive but masculine plural. So instead of being legendi libros, it becomes legendorum librorum, okay? And this still translates the same way. I have a great love of reading books, all right? This is going to take a little practice. You're going to have to see a number of these to get used to translating this kind of sentence because we have a gerund that has turned into a gerundive phrase, okay? But that's it. You should write this down. You should write down the translations of these sentences to make sure, and specifically of this one, because this is the most important one. And I will see you in class. Walete.